Hello one and all, welcome to the channel Cloud Knowledge. This video is about creation of Azure SQL Database Server with user assigned managed identity. So here on the screen you can clearly see we are in the standard Microsoft Learn documentation page for Azure SQL, and on the left panel you can see under the quick start section for creation of the database and the server we have opened with user assigned managed identity. So this guide will help us to create a logical server for Azure SQL database with the user assigned managed identity. So in the documentation, prerequisites are given. Next is the creation step of the server using 5 methods. First is through Azure Portal, CLI, PowerShell, REST API, and ARM template. In this video, we will demonstrate it through Azure Portal. So let me first take you to the Azure Portal where we are going to create this SQL logical server of Azure SQL Database with user assigned managed identity. If we go at the top, there it is mentioned what is user assigned managed identity in Microsoft Enter ID for Azure SQL. You can read here in detail. Okay, here in this page we can read about the managed identities in Azure SQL, and in this video we are just going to create the logical server using user managed identity. So let me take you to the Azure portal. Here we are inside the resource group Cloud Knowledge. We'll click on create, and here we are going to create Azure SQL database with the logical server having user assigned managed identity. So second is the option SQL database, which is an Azure service. We'll click on SQL database. So select it. It will open up a new page where we have to give in the details in the basics tab first. So let me first take you to the documentation. Here also we are browsing to the SQL deployment. Okay. If we are not already logged into the Azure portal, we have to log in under the SQL database resource type. We have to select single database and create it. In the basics tab, we have to give the details which are given here. We have to create a new server and give the details for the server, networking section, security section, and then in the security section, the configuration of the identity is there. Okay, so let me go back and fill in the relevant details first in the basics tab. So the subscription, resource group, you select as is, and then in the database detail we'll name this database. So let's name it as CK SQL DB with user assigned managed identity, UMI. CK SQL DB UMI. Then the server will create a new server. We'll click on create new. Here we'll name it as CK SQL DB UMI server. Okay. Location, let it be the default East US location. Authentication method, we are going to select both SQL and Microsoft Enter Authentication. Here, since we have selected Microsoft Enter Authentication, we have to set an admin. So let's click on set admin and we'll select our own user. We'll select the admin. We'll give here CK SQL DB SQL DB UMI as the admin username, and give password which is compliant. This looks okay. We'll click on OK. So a new server with the name CK SQL DB UMI server is created here. In East US, we are not using Elastic Pool. This is for development purpose. We'll leave the compute and storage as is. Let this be LRS. We'll click on networking. In the networking, let's select the connectivity as public endpoint because this is just for demo purpose. So we'll allow all Azure resources and services to access the server, allow current IP, connection policy default, encryption or encrypt connections here as TLS 1.2, security. Now this is important. If we go back here in the documentation, it says on the security tab under identity, configure identities. This is probably an older version where it used to look like this. Okay, here it is defender, ledger, and then server identity. Here also it is server. Here also it is defender, ledger, and identity. Here they have renamed it to server identity, and here in the server identity section, we have to configure identities. Here it was also configure identities. Now they have renamed it. So these resources, these services by Azure keeps evolving. So you might see a little difference in the UI or the names, but yeah, this is the page where we have to actually configure the identity. So we'll click on configure identity. If you already have an existing user assigned managed identity, you can configure here, or you can create a new one. When you click on identities, it will open up a page where it will show a system assigned managed identity, whether it is on or off. We can turn it on, but our scope or our current video scope is around user assigned managed identity. So we will here click on add, and we'll add the user assigned managed identity if it already exists. So here, upon clicking on this add button, it will open up on the right side the subscription and the user assigned managed identities which are present inside this. You can make use of the existing one, or if you do not have one, you can create one. Okay. And here itself we can see that user assigned managed identities enable Azure resources to authenticate to cloud services. Example, keyword, without storing credentials in code. This type of managed identities are created as standalone Azure resources and have their own life cycle. Means it will not delete with the resource getting deleted, like in the case of system assigned managed identity. A single resource, example a VM, can utilize multiple user assigned managed identities. Similarly, a single user assigned managed identity can be shared across multiple resources. Now let me duplicate this tab, and we'll try to create a new user assigned managed identity. So we'll go to the home section and we'll click on here identity. Okay. User assigned managed identity. Just click over. It will open up this page. Create user assigned managed identity. It will show up in the basics section, the subscription and the resource group. We already have cloud knowledge resource group where we want this identity to be created. Region, let it be East to West. We'll name this. So let's say this user managed identity name is CK user managed identity, CK UMI. We'll click on next. The tags will leave it as is. We'll click on review and create. After the validation is completed over here, we will create this user assigned managed identity. So it is getting deployed. Let's wait for its completion. Deployment succeeded. We can go to the resource and we can see here CK UMI managed identity is created. It is showing us in the overview section the details of this, where it is created, under which resource group and subscription, and the other details are here. Okay, on the left panel you can open up the other details for this user assigned managed identity. Now this CK UMI we are going to use here in the SQL database for this server. So here we can search for CK UMI. Since we have created it just now in the resource group cloud knowledge, it is now showing up here. We'll select this and click on add. Right? We have selected, click on add. Now, when one or more user managed identities are assigned to the server, designate one of those as the primary or default identity for the server. Now, under primary identity, we have to select CK UMI, which we have selected above. This is done. For the UMI, we'll click on apply. So server identity, configure identities setting we have done. Rest of the settings we'll leave it as is. We'll go to the next. We'll leave it as is. We'll go to the tags section and click on review and create. Let's click on create. We'll go back to the documentation. Now the deployment has initialized. It will be submitted and soon the resource will be created. Let me take you back to the documentation. Here it says on the identity pane under the user assigned managed identity, select add. So yeah, the steps are given which we already performed. We have selected our user assigned managed identity. Under the primary identity, we have selected the UMI. Okay, the same, and click on apply, review and create. On the Review and Create tab, after reviewing, select Create. This is it. After creation of the SQL database server, we'll see how we'll see that the server is actually having UMI. So let's go back here, wait for the completion of deployment. We can see that the deployment succeeded. So we'll click on go to resource here. The SQL database SQL DB UMI is created, and we had configured UMI, that is user assigned managed identity, to the server. So we'll click on the server name. It will open up the SQL server, and on the left pane, if we go to the identity section, we could see here under the user assigned managed identity, we have CKUMI present. Okay, it's already selected for our server, newly created SQL server. So this is how we create the SQL server, Azure SQL Server, with user assigned managed identity during creation of the database as a server. If you already have an existing server which is not having the user assigned managed identity, then how we will create it? So here, let me take you to another tab where we have the Cloud Knowledge Resource Group, and which has another SQL server. So let me take you to CK SQL DB server, which is an old server present in the resource group, same resource group. Let's first see if this CK SQL DB server has user assigned managed identity or not. So as I said, we have to go to the security section, identity section under it, and we could see here that under the UMI, we don't have any. If we want to add a new one, we have this plus add button. We can select one from the drop down, or you can type the name. So the one which we created just now, we can assign the same user assigned managed identity to this SQL server also. So we'll click on add. We'll select the primary identity and click on save so that this identity is updated for the CK SQL DB server as well. I hope you have understood from this video how we can create the server and assign user assigned managed identity, or for an existing server which does not have the user assigned managed identity, where we'll go and add that identity. Thank you for watching the current video. Do let me know in comments if you have any queries. Happy learning. Bye bye.